Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 3, Episode 4. Today is Sunday, January the 24th, 2016. My name is Graham Perro. With me, as always, are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. Unfortunately, Melissa's computer had a bit of a mishap today, so we can hear Melissa, but we can't see her. Hopefully that'll get fixed sometime soon. We have hopefully a pretty good show tonight. One thing I want to get to is we talked about Jeff Snyder last week, so I want to revisit that briefly. A couple of games, one of which I'm not happy about, the other of which Tyler is probably not happy about. Melissa's probably not so bad on that one. Hopefully we'll talk a little bit about the Rock and the Stealth, neither of which had the greatest weekends at all. And maybe we'll try and investigate what's up with those guys. And then we'll get to our predictions for last week and predictions for next week, which is 5 games, so a little busier than this past weekend. So to start off with, we discussed Jeff Snyder last week and his retirement and how good of a player he was. And we were concentrating mainly on face-offs, but he was obviously skilled at a lot of other areas of the game. And one thing that Melissa mentioned was not only was he good at the face-offs and the face-off itself, he was very dangerous, but one of the reasons that he was more dangerous than your average face-off guy was that he could grab that ball and then head down and score. And it did seem that he's just done that a lot more than anybody else. And so it got me wondering if I could actually figure out whether that was true or not. And I have game information, including all goals and assists and penalties and such, going back to 2005. So I went through the database and figured out how many goals were scored, and I arbitrarily chose 7 seconds. So 7 seconds or less after the previous goal, and how many of them were scored by Jeff Snyder versus anybody else. And over that 10-year period from 2005 to 2015, which I guess is 11 seasons, Snyder did this 22 times. And the next closest person was Stephen Hoare, who did it 6 times.
Graham, is this just his goals or also assists?
This was just goals, actually. I probably should have looked at assists as well.
The 08 season that Iannucci had a ton of goals, it was Snyder facing off, popping to him on the wing, and he would score. I remember, if you remember Cosmo getting in a fight, it was because Iannucci scored less than 7 seconds after a face-off because he got the feed down and from Snyder.
That would definitely be interesting. I should have included assists in that as well. I did also look at goals that were scored less than 7 seconds after the beginning of a quarter, and that didn't make much of a difference. I think he had done it 6 or 7 times. Bob Snyder had done it 6 or 7 times. 2 or 3 other face-off guys had also done it 5 or 6 times. So he wasn't far and away any better than anybody else in that category. But when it was just from the previous goal, he had almost 4 times as many as anybody else. So, Melissa, you nailed it.
Well, it's probably because so often it was against us. you just remember seeing that, just watching him, and it's like, oh, ouch. He just did it again. Great.
Yeah, that was certainly one of Snyder's strengths. So I just wanted to mention that Melissa called it, and we've proven it with the numbers, so that's good. On to the games. Yeah, like I said, Tyler wouldn't be happy with one of them, and I wasn't too pleased with the first. Toronto won Buffalo. I wasn't able to get to this game, but I did watch it on the broadcast. Buffalo ended up winning 12-6. This one was kind of similar to the Georgia game, which started the Rock season, where they took a 2-goal lead early, and then they lost the lead, and then they got it back again, and then they lost it. And it was kind of back and forth for the first quarter and a half, not quite to the half. And then they just stopped scoring. And in the first game, Georgia went on to win. And in this game, obviously Buffalo went on to win. But it was kind of the same thing. They just couldn't score. And if I remember correctly, let me just check. It wasn't quite the same score. I was going to say they lost by the same 12-6 score, but it was actually 12-7 in the Georgia game. Anyway, I actually didn't think the Rock offense was as bad in this game as they had been in previous games. Buffalo's defense was really strong, and Anthony Cosmo played a great game. Um, that being said, 6 goals is just not going to do it. They did shuffle around the offense a little bit in that Dan Lintner and Turner Evans
Still, oh,
um, were both healthy scratches. Um, Casey Behrens was back. Kevin Ross was back from injury and provided a couple of goals and got down in the corners like he likes to do. So they looked all right. There were times when they looked really good and their passing was really good, but then Cosmo would just shut the door. Other times they looked a little bit lost, like they had done in the Rochester games. Also wanted to mention Alex Keto Hill had a great game, I thought, for the Bandits. He was returning. I believe he was suspended for a couple of games for something that happened in the preseason, so he didn't play in the first couple of Bandits games. But he looked really good in this one, playing some solid defense, playing some solid offense. He's a transition guy, so he's all over the floor. Pretty quick. He's listed as 5'11" and 166 pounds. So he's tall, but pretty skinny. It looks like. Now, and maybe that's old, and he's put on some pounds, but I think he's only 22 or 23 or something. He's pretty young. Kevin Burnell, I thought, had a pretty good transition game as well. The Bandits, just in general, are a pretty good transition team. And then, of course, Ryan Benesh, Dane Smith, those guys are monsters. Mark Stainhouse had one play where, and I've seen this, I don't know how many times, he was covered by 4 Rock defenders at the same time, and he kept the ball the whole time, never gave it up, and then one of the Rock defenders got a penalty for cross-checking him in the head. What can you say about Stainhouse? He give him the ball, and you just can't get it away from him. He's the guy you love to hate but wouldn't mind on your team. Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about that. It was disappointing, but it did give me a little bit of hope in that the Rock didn't play terrible like they have prior to this. They just ran up against a great defense and a great goalie. So maybe some hope for the future, but still 6 goals is just not going to do it. Melissa, I know you didn't get the chance to see this one, but Tyler, did you see it at all?
I had it in the background while I was doing a family project, so I was paying somewhat attention to it. But by the time I got into it, Buffalo had already opened their lead. I really loved your tweet about Alex Kiddo Hill. You almost had the Captain America line down of like, somebody buy that kid a sandwich when first time you see Steve Rogers going into the get his injections. But even for cheeseburger, it was still great. Rocker, they're missing what? Sanders, the quarterback, I guess, is what they're missing. There's no settled offense. Everybody's trying to do it themselves, is what I'm seeing, I think, and it's not working out as a team. And so that maybe they can get a couple goals early as individuals, but for 60 minutes, it's not clicking for them as a whole, and they're in a world of hurt. They're this year's version of the Calgary Roughnecks from last year. I think they're 0-6 to start the year, so there's still plenty of time to not give up hope. Though they do have one more team in their division. Roughnecks just had to beat one team. You would have to get ahead of 2 teams at this point to make a playoff run later in the year if you can start clicking. So I have a lot of concern for the current state of the Toronto Rock. Any thoughts about what you've heard here, Melissa?
I'm glad to hear that Toronto actually sounds like they're clicking just a little bit better. Maybe they'll actually break out of this slump. But yeah, I mean, the Bandits are a tough team. They seem to play up to or down to their opponents. And if they're playing somebody who really is playing better, then they can sometimes dismantle themselves with penalties and things like that. But in general, they're just a really tough team. So it doesn't surprise me that a struggling Toronto Rock had a little bit more problem with them. But hopefully it'll have given them some hope for next week that they can break out of this slump that they're in. I'd hate to see them continue down this road because it just doesn't seem like the team that we know.
No, other than a couple of years in 2007, 2008 area, yeah, the Rock have been one of the at least one of the better teams in the league since their inception, and so this is certainly out of character. Um, yeah, we'll get to that a little more a little bit later. The other game, which I also saw, and I want to get you guys to discuss as well, was of course Colorado beating Vancouver 14-5. And if we thought the Toronto game was kind of a runaway victory for Buffalo, this one was even more so for Colorado. Vancouver never led in this game at all. They didn't even score till a couple of minutes into the second quarter. They didn't score at all in the fourth, though Colorado didn't either, but by that point they were winning by 9, so they weren't quite as concerned. I watched this one as well right after the Rock game. Dylan Ward was amazing. So, I mean, you can't put it all on the stealth offense for not being able to score, because when they did get their opportunities, he was just shut the door. So he had a great game. They did have a lot of posts and crossbars, it seemed, that anytime the stealth looked like, okay, we're going to break out of it, we've got the passing down now, and now we just need a couple to get by, and we'll get our confidence back, and we'll be right back in that. And then they'd get in there, and they'd hit a post, or somebody would desperately, throw a stick up. Some of the defenders would throw the stick up, and they'd hit the stick, and it would go off to the side, or something. They just couldn't buy a break, it seemed. But it was a pretty disappointing game from the stealth point of view, I'm pretty sure. Tyler, what do you think?
Total Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. I think my thought during the game last night, I tweeted, was, can we just hypnotize the entire stealth roster to think they're on the road? I don't know what the difference is, but most games in Langley, they come out uninspired, maybe is the description I would go for. Came out super slow last night, looked nothing like the team we saw a week before. But 2 weeks ago, when they were at home against New England, they didn't start as slow, but the general outcome was about the same. And I can't pinpoint anything. I mean, they had minor roster tweaks between here and there. And Colorado was already good. We know that they put up 16, 15, and 16, something along those lines in the first two games, and 14 last night. So, yay, the stealth held them under their average, though.
Silver lining, that's
the fourth quarter. Yeah. So like you said, nobody scored in the fourth quarter. By that point, both teams were just trying to have that clock go and get done. They knew it was over, which is also sad. The idea that it seems like, well, 9 goals at the half or whatever it was would be reasonable, but 9 goals in the fourth quarter, no, we're not going to get that this week. And it's like terrible mindset possibly there. They didn't click. They didn't have. Oh, I know why they didn't click. Sorry, I don't know why I didn't think about this. No Garrett Billings. Huge difference. Keegan Ball came in and played on the right side. So the stealth were reflective of their 2015 team minus the quarterback, though Billings was there in the first game, so they also had poor performance there. So definitely missing Garrett Billings on offense. He definitely sets things up better than anybody else they have by a long ways. Huge difference. And maybe that had everybody in their mind, like, oh, boy, we don't even have Garrett. What are we going to do here? But the Mammoth didn't care. Mammoth said, we're going to do what we do. And they controlled all aspects of the game. Callum Crawford has been an incredible addition to their team. I thought maybe he'd be hit or miss. He's a little bit older, but older relative to the Swarm means nothing. Of but even then, he's a little bit older than most guys in the league, and he's taking the opportunities he gets and capitalizing. Lots of goals, lots of shots. He's flourishing, and I think when you have John Grant, Adam Jones taking the top defenders away on not even his half of the floor, but still it's opening stuff up for him, and they did a great job recruiting him. I don't know if they had to recruit him because he was a free agent, so people probably had offers to him. Whatever they did to get him to show up is working, and they are, I think, number one in the power rankings on Isle Indoor, and they'll stay that way for a while. They could lose a game and still hold that spot because they just look that much better than everybody. And so let's focus on the happy stuff with them instead of the bad stuff with the Stealth. Any happy thoughts on your 4-0 Colorado Mammoth, Melissa?
I'm definitely surprised. What I'm also surprised about is that John Grant Jr. had 5 goals on the night. So apparently he was just on fire. I mean, Adam Jones only had 2. I mean, this is the man who just last week had a sock trick. So you would think with Vancouver seemingly struggling just a little bit this game that it might have been a little more diverse amongst the Mammoth offense. So to see John Grant Jr. just so heavy on the goals was kind of surprising. A lot of those goals were also power play goals. So it's a little tricky. But I'm definitely excited to see that they are starting off so strong. I'm just, that pessimistic part of me is now waiting for the other foot to drop because I've been in this position too many seasons lately where it's like, yay, they're doing great. And now they're sucking the rest of the year. Okay. So I'm trying to be really optimistic and enjoy what it is, but there's that part of me that's just worried that we're just doing really well for the first half of the season. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much. But it makes me look forward for the next few games a little more than maybe I was coming into the season.
All right. I guess we can continue along those lines. I was going to say maybe we can discuss what we think is wrong with the Rock and the Stealth. I was kind of hoping that Game 1 of the Stealth was the anomaly and Game 2 was more like what we would see. But like you said, Tyler, they seem to have reverted back to their style of play in Game 1. I don't remember if I think they bounced back and forth between Penny and Levis a couple of times in that game. Though I seem to remember Penny played the entire second half and only allowed 2 goals, so I guess that was kind of a plus. But like we said, the Mammoth were already up by 9 at that point, so they were probably not pushing quite as hard as they might have otherwise. So I guess you kind of already answered this, Tyler, but any thoughts on what might be wrong with the Stealth?
Yeah, the biggest issue that came to there offensively was the missing of Garrett Billings and driving the offense through him. Defensively, I couldn't place it. I mean, they've given up a ton of goals to New England and Mammoth now, and so I was watching to see if it was Penny letting in shots or the defense hanging him out to dry.
No, I don't know if we lost Tyler.
I think we may have, because I was starting to wonder if it was my computer that froze up, but since you're clear, it must be Tyler.
Okay, I don't know if Tyler is gone and will hopefully be coming back. He was mentioning the Stealth defense, and there was certainly a couple of plays in Saturday night's game where the defense was just not there at all. I know one play that Brad Schaller mentioned, somebody, I don't remember who it was just right on the doorstep, right outside the crease. Somebody fed him with a pass, and he had all kinds of time to figure out where to shoot on Penny, and there wasn't a defender within 10 feet of him. He was just all by himself. He had all kinds of time. There was another play where, and again, I'm forgetting who it was, um, but one of the Mammoth players went down, shot. It was Cam Holding. Went down, took a shot, and either missed the net or a save was made. Actually, I think the save was made and the ball dropped, and it was just sitting sort of on the goal line but outside the goal, and it was just sitting there. And Holding was standing behind the crease, and he just saw the ball sitting there. And Penny never made a move for it. Maybe he didn't know where it was. The Mammoth defender didn't make a move for it. So Holding just kind of reached in, grabbed the ball, and then continued and got a fresh 30. So it just seemed like the
Wow. Okay.
Mammoth team, or the stealth defense, was just not there for parts of it. And so, yeah, Penny may have let in a couple of softies here and there, but a lot of it wasn't his fault. Tyler, you're back.
Sorry about that. I was gonna say my last thought was I guess I'm still waiting for more information around the idea of home versus road. If they continue to have stinkers at home, that's bad. It's gonna kill fan attendance and kill their motivation. Like if they go to home games with like an attitude of boy, it's a home game this week, versus phew, finally at home, I don't have to worry about traveling and all that stuff. And that's gonna make for a bad season. But I want to see how they do on the next road game going up to Calgary, I believe. It'll be great. Could be a home against Calgary because Jake and Brad Challoner are broadcasting, but we'll see. I got to pay attention to the schedule a little closer, I guess.
Next week they are indeed in Calgary.
Okay.
That should be a good game.
Very good game.
Hopefully. It's
All
hard
right.
to see them when they're so one-sided.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I finished my thought. Sorry about the drop.
Okay. There was something else I was going to say, and I can't remember what it was. But we'll move on to the Rock and see what we think about those guys. I think you covered it, Tyler. It's at least part of it is the lack of Josh Sanderson. He was the quarterback. He was the guy who set up the plays. He was the guy. Not everything went through him necessarily, but considering the number of assists he got, an awful lot of it did go through him. And I do remember there being an issue a couple of years ago where Colin Doyle was out for a few games, and the offense just started really clicking really well, and then he came back and they threw up a stinker. And I'm not blaming Doyle. It's not that his presence is screwing things up, but he wasn't there at all last year, and Sanderson had a career year. And then Sanderson's out and Doyle's back, and this is what we get. Again, I don't want to blame Doyle. Doyle's always been one of my favorite players. And he's certainly shown signs in the games that we've seen that he is the Colin Doyle that we've been seeing for 15 years or whatever it is. But there's been a couple of times where he looks every bit of the 37 or 38 years old that he is. Maybe they figured without Josh, Colin will be the guy, and he's maybe just not up to the task anymore. I hate to say it that way, but that is kind of what it looks like. And maybe they kept out Turner Evans and Lintner just to say, okay, this is mostly what we had last year, minus Josh plus Colin. So let's see if we go with that and figure things out before we start throwing in rookies. But I guess I'm just talking about the offense here because I don't see a big issue with the Rock defense. I mean, the goaltending has been pretty good, if not better than pretty good. The defense has been pretty good. Again, they kept the Nighthawks. What did they do? Kept the Nighthawks to 12 goals. Actually, they've lost all 4 games by 12 goals. So allowing 12 goals is not so bad. The problem is that you only score half of that.
That's one thought I was going to have is the Rock may be 0-4, but their goal differential for the season might be equal to the Stealths because the Stealths have been so bad in their 2 games. I'm not sure what that number is right now.
The
No,
Rock are minus 23. The Stealth are minus 17. So they're both far and away the worst because the next closest is minus 2 from Calgary.
I don't know, Graham. I can kind of feel that pain when it seems like the defense is doing all they can, but I mean, if your offense isn't scoring, then it doesn't matter how well your defense is playing. It's been the Mammoth for the past several years. We've seen them doing that exact same thing where one end of the field just isn't clicking, and so it doesn't matter how good the other side's playing. But we've also seen where, like you were saying with Colin Doyle, you change one player, and sometimes that's a 180, and it's fantastic, and other times it does the complete opposite. We've definitely seen it with on the Mammoth with some of the players that they've tried to force in there that it just doesn't work, and they change something, and all of a sudden it's like a different team. So
Doyle was totally the quarterback in the San Jose years. His 3 years there, he led his players, and he had young players around him that he was nurturing, like Reese Touch. So he can do that role. I just don't know why he's not clicking at the moment with performing the same task other than age in Toronto.
So I started a mini Twitter conversation last night saying if the Rock do have to make some moves and some trades here, what do they do? Obviously, they're not going to trade away any of their offensive guys. I guess if you want to trade an offensive guy or a different offensive guy, if you think that might be the problem, then great. But whenever I think trade, I always think, okay, what does the team have in abundance that they can maybe get rid of? Not get rid of, but lose and still be a decent team. So if you've got a ton of defense, you can give away some defense for some offense if that's your problem. So what do the Rock have a lot of? They have two really good starting goaltenders. So Brandon Miller requested a trade to Toronto because he wanted to be close to home. He's 36. He's not likely to be shipped off to Georgia or to Colorado or to anywhere. So he wants to remain with the Rock. Trading him is not likely an option. So maybe Nick Rose. Did they trade Nick Rose? The question is, who needs goaltending? And I suggested Nick Rose to Vancouver for Garrett Billings, but I don't think that's going to happen. And of course, it's awfully early in Eric Penny's starting career to say, okay, he's a bust, let's get somebody else.
Yeah, it'd be about salvaging the season, not just long-term dumping Penny.
Right. But who else needs goaltending? Nobody really. So
just
do they?
Stealth. But not. Yeah, it sucks to say that about the kid, but at this point, he's got 2 bad games.
And then he faced the defending champs in Saskatchewan in their hometown and played a whale of a game. So it's really odd. It's like you said, the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing happening in Vancouver. But do the Georgia Swarm need a veteran goalie? They have 2 young guys, which has been working reasonably well so far. But do they want? I was going to say, do they want a veteran backup for Zach Higgins or for Brody McDonald, one or the other? I don't know which one of them they would want to go with, but I'm not sure that's really their problem. New England is probably quite happy with the way Evan Kirk is playing. Cosmo's having a pretty good year so far. There's no way the Nighthawks are going to do anything at the goaltender position or the Rush. And Calgary's pretty happy with their trio of goaltenders. So sure, we've got Nick Rose to trade, but if nobody's going to take him, you're not going to get anything for him. So, and as Melissa and I were talking briefly before the show, trading in this league is a little weirder than if you're talking trades in baseball or hockey or other sports, because you've got people who want to play in a certain city because that's where they live. Frequently, that's Toronto or Vancouver. Or they want to play close to there, and they're just not going to be traded. So you might look at a trade in the NHL and say, well, maybe they'll trade this guy or maybe they'll trade that guy. Are the Rock going to trade Colin Doyle? Probably not, because they know that Doyle will just say, I want to play in Toronto. I don't want to play anywhere else, and I'll retire if you trade me. Or I won't report or something.
No team will reverse it. No team will except Doyle because he's not going to show up.
Right. So you can look at all these trade possibilities, and 75% of them are just not going to happen at all. Same with when the Bandits were struggling. Well, maybe they could trade Tavares. Well, they're not going to trade Tavares. You just know that. So you can take that off the table right now. Anyway, so now that we have totally not solved the rock or the stealth problem, let's move on to our predictions. What did we do last week? I went 1-0. Sorry, 1-1. Melissa was 2-0, so Melissa continues her hot streak. Tyler, not so much. So Tyler and I are now 5-9 tied on the season. Melissa is ahead of us at 500, 7-7. So, as I think we did last week as well, Melissa, you get to go first.
Yeah, we'll see how long this streak goes. So for Georgia and Toronto, I found that game kind of difficult to choose because we've seen Georgia play kind of hot or cold, and you never know which team is going to show up. And with Toronto being on, I do think they're on the edge of breaking this losing streak, but I don't know if it's this week or not. And so I'm going to go with Georgia just because Toronto still may be struggling, and with a week off to rest, that could either help or hurt Georgia. So we'll see which it is. So I'm probably going to regret this choice, but we'll stick with Georgia. It's Colorado and at the Rush. I'm going to pick the Rush. I just think they're a better team there, and we'll see. If I'm going to keep picking against my team and they win, then I still win, right? Buffalo, New England. We're going to go with Buffalo. I just think they're the stronger team right now until New England proves me wrong. And with Georgia and Rochester, I'm going to go with Rochester. I think playing back-to-back games is always hard, especially when you're playing a fresh team. And so Rochester just has the edge right there, especially it's at home. With Vancouver and Calgary, we're going to go with Calgary. What about you, Graham? Or do you want? Well, let's go with Tyler. That way you can just sign us off.
Alrighty then. Let's see. The Georgia-Toronto. I'm going to go with Georgia because they did it before, so they can do it again, barring any big changes on the Rock side during the week. I don't see. I haven't seen enough from them to put them over the top. Colorado at Saskatchewan. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and pick the 4-0 team to win that game.
It does seem odd that seems like a out on a limb kind of pick, doesn't it?
And yet it's going to be in the minority, not to give away some of the other people's picks who haven't picked yet. Buffalo at New England. I'm going to go ahead and go with New England. They're on a good start for the season. They have, I think, a ton of confidence with their new coach and having Crowley and Sean Evans together, causing headaches for people. So I think I can see them beating Buffalo. Georgia at Rochester. Same aspect that Melissa had. A second night on the road, a little wear and tear. Rochester will be fresh. I got Rochester winning that one. And last pick is Vancouver at Calgary. I'm going to go with the Hides part of the Jekyll. Well, no, sorry. Yeah, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Who's the bad one? I'm thinking of Frankenstein, which is not even two people.
I think Dr. Hyde. Yeah, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So Hyde.
Yeah, Mr. Hyde's the scary one.
Yeah. So let's not have that. Thank you. Dr. Jekyll on the road, Vancouver stealth on the road. Let's get that final piece of information that they're great on the road, and I can have them beat Calgary. Hopefully, really not a strong, enthusiastic pick for me, but let's see what happens. Who do you got, Graham?
Okay, Georgia, Toronto, and I don't know if I'm picking with my head or picking with my heart on this one as a Rock fan, but I'm going to say this is the one where they break the losing streak, and I'm going to pick Toronto on this one. Colorado and Saskatchewan, yeah, like we said, it does seem weird to say picking the 4-0 team against the 1-1 team, is an unusual pick, but I'm going to have to agree with Melissa on this one and go with the Rush. Though I'm looking forward to watching that game. Buffalo, New England. Buffalo played really well this past weekend against Toronto. Their transition is really good. They're fast all over the place. Their two-headed offensive monster is amazing. And then adding guys like Darrell into that mix as well. And Cosmo played a great game, so I think they'll ride that into a win next week. So I'm going with Buffalo. Georgia, Rochester. It's hard to pick against Matt Vince generally, so I'm going to go with the Nighthawks there. And Vancouver, Calgary, and I kind of struggled with this one as well. Like you said, Tyler, Vancouver was really good in Saskatchewan, but at home not so much. This one is not a home game, so maybe we'll see the game 2 stealth instead of the game 1 and 3 stealth. But I decided to go with Calgary on this one anyway. But yeah, like you said, I'm looking forward to watching that one. That should be fun. Yeah, I guess that's it for this week. I guess. Sorry, I'm getting a little messed up here. AddictedToLacrosse.com is where you want to go for all of our old shows, and this one will be up there in a little while. If you want to get a hold of us, Lax Podcast on Twitter, Lax Podcast on Facebook, feedback at addictedtolacrosse.com if you want to send us email. We are on iTunes. If you do a search for Addicted to Lacrosse on iTunes, you will find our podcast, so leave us a review there. That would be good. And that's about it. This has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening or watching, and we'll see you next week.